This is Gray Fox.
This is Nullfield.
And you're listening to Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons. I'm your host, Kerry Parker. Today we have episode 389 for August 12th, 2024. And as you probably can tell, my voice is a little bit hoarse. I was out last night at one of the party things here at DEF CON, and it was very loud, so I was having to yell, which always kind of makes my voice a little bit hoarse. So I apologize for the voice being a little bit off today. Now, I will say one thing. You're probably going to notice that the audio qualities, besides my voice being hoarse, is going to be a little bit different. I'm in my hotel room. There are background noises. There are people walking by. There are people above me. And at least when I recorded some of this at night, there were helicopters, like lots of helicopters. Basically, at nighttime here in Las Vegas, there's a lot of tourist flights that go around to see the Las Vegas Strip from the air. And I don't know how many of those are going to bleed through into the podcast. Many times I had to stop recording and wait for them to pass. And there was often 3 or 4 of them in a row. And so there may still be some of these in the background. You may catch that, but there's only so much I can do recording here live in my hotel room. So we've got a regular news show for you today, and some of these 2 stories actually premiered here this week at one of these conferences I was at. And I've got my tip of the week, which will be the second half, or the second part anyway, of my talk about finding your data online and how to delete it. But before we get into that, I want to give you a little bit of a little flavor for what was going on here in Las Vegas. So first of all, it's hot. It's really hot. When I landed, it was 115 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 46 degrees Celsius. And it's been very close to that. The high temperatures have been very close to that all week. Now, thankfully, almost everything you do here is indoors, so I was in air conditioning most of the time. My hotel was close to the Las Vegas Convention Center, so I could walk back and forth, and sometimes those walks were really, really hot, but I didn't have far to go. The Convention Center is a new location for DEF CON this year, and it's just massive. But I do like the new location. It's everything under one roof now. There's no casino involved. So there's no smoke, there's no ding, 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 and all the stuff you have to walk through to get to the conference center. And I did happen to meet up with a couple of my patrons, as you may have noticed, Nullfield and Gray Fox. They were here, and so I got together with them, got a chance to hang out with those 2 guys. And at one point, I'm like, why don't I let those guys do the intro to the show this week? So I have a press badge for DEF CON, so I'm special. And so I went to the press room. There's a separate room where we can go and kind of get work done and things like that. And it's quieter, so we can even do interviews and things like that in there. That's where I interviewed Jeff Moss a couple of years back. I took him back to the press room. So anyway, I took these guys into the press room and whipped out the recording rig and got them to record the intro. That's actually a perk that I've offered my patrons in the past, and this is the first time that anyone's ever taken me up on it. I mean, obviously, it was kind of convenient that we were all in one spot together, which is not going to happen very often. But I'm glad we had a chance to do it, so I thought that was cool. And I also just want to take a moment to give a heartfelt thank you and shout out to Gray Fox. I've met him here. I think this is probably the 3rd year in a row that I've met him here. And he has always been very, very helpful. When I come here, I'm always by myself. And there are some times when I can't be in multiple places at once. And he very often has the ability to grab me something or save me a seat or things like that. And he's been very, very helpful. So I wanted to give a shout out to him. And I always make sure I try to get him his Dragon Challenge coin free drink every time I see him. Which reminds me, I forgot to ask Nullfield if he had a coin. Well, Nullfield, if you had a coin, sorry if I did get a chance to buy you a drink. But anyway, thanks again to Gray Fox. He's always been a great help for me here. He also gave 2 talks, one at BSides and one at DEF CON. I got a chance to see both of those, which was great. He did a really great job. One was on software-defined radio, and one was on travel security. So it was great to be able to see those. So again, there's basically 3 big conferences that make up Hacker Summer Camp. There's BSides Las Vegas. BSides is a global thing, as you should know if you caught the interview with Jack Daniel last week. And if you missed that, you should definitely go back and listen to that. That was on Tuesday and Wednesday. And then there's Black Hat, which is the really big, expensive corporate cybersecurity one, the one that tends to get a lot more of the attention, at least in the news. It's just too expensive and too uptight for me. I don't like Black Hat, to be honest. So that is on Wednesday and Thursday. I usually don't go to that. And then there's DEF CON, which technically starts on Thursday, but nothing really happens on Thursday. You pick up your badge, you get registered, and then you basically just do some socializing. The big days for DEF CON are Friday and Saturday, and I'm actually recording this on Sunday. Usually I would be done by now, but I'm recording this on Sunday. And there's a couple more talks today and the closing ceremonies. That I think I'm just going to go to the closing ceremonies. So I missed the first day of BSides, and I went to the second day. One of the things I really wanted to see was Josh Corman and his I Am the Cavalry track, because I knew he was going to be unveiling something big, and he did. I got to see some of that on Wednesday. He's got a new project that he is calling Undisruptible 27, and the 27 is as in the year 2027. And it's an even more focused resiliency and robustness campaign for critical infrastructure like water and wastewater and food delivery and energy, fuel, things like that. The things that I think is the way he put it, that if we went without for a very short period of time, we would be reduced to Lord of the Flies. And the 2027 part comes in from basically China saying that, intimating at least, that by 2027 they may be wanting to invade Taiwan. And we actually had a big congressional testimony earlier this year from, I think it was the head of the FBI, the head of CISA, and the head of, I think, the NSA, basically all saying that we need to be paying attention to this. And because, if China were to make a move like that, they would basically really would prefer that we would just sit on the sidelines and not defend Taiwan. And so they've already been messing around. We've caught Chinese hackers messing around in our water treatment systems, I think it was, our water facilities, kind of probing around and trying to establish some footholds. So the idea being that our critical infrastructure could be subverted to try to convince us to not get involved. Now, that is a very specific scenario, which we don't know for sure that's going to happen. However, there are threats like that out there. Certainly North Korea, Iran, Russia, all of these countries would have, if they were ever to get in any kind of conflict with us, or perhaps even try to keep us from staying out of a conflict, might want to show that they could disrupt our infrastructure, or in the worst case, try to disrupt our infrastructure to try to keep us distracted and out of the way. So anyway, I actually want to bring Josh on the show and we can talk about that at length. But that is one of the main things I wanted to check out at BSides, which I did. And for me, a lot of the best parts of this Hacker Summer Camp is the socialization and networking opportunities. And a lot of those come at the parties. And the BSides pool party, which they used to wrap up the thing every year, is a great place for that. It starts at 10 p.m. and goes till I don't know when. I left at 1:30. And it was still going strong. Had a chance to hang out with Alan Friedman, talk to several Cult of the Dead Cow folks while I was there, talked to Josh Corman for a little bit and met his lovely wife. But by 1:30, I was just drenched in sweat. It was hot. It wasn't crazy hot, but it was hot. But it was in a contained courtyard of the Tuscany Hotel, and there was a massive pool there. So it was just really super humid. There was no air moving. They didn't have misters going or anything. I was drenched. It was actually kind of miserable, but great for social opportunities. So then came DEF CON. DEF CON was the main reason I was here. I have not heard the official figures yet, but there's likely 30 to 35,000 attendees. But in this new convention center, it really didn't feel as crowded as it has in the past. The hallways are really long and wide, so you could get around pretty easily, even though there was a ton of people around you. Again, everything was in one building. You didn't have to go through a smoky maze-like casino to get to anything. I really like this venue a lot better. I saw a lot of great talks. I got to see Joseph Cox talk about his book Darkwire, and I finally had a chance to meet him in person, shake his hand. That was something I was looking forward to. There was a really cool Hacker 40th anniversary panel discussion with folks from Cult of the Dead Cow, Root, Legion of Doom, Masters of Deception, Loft. These are classic old school hacker groups. It was really cool to see a lot of them at this panel, and I'm angling to do an interview with some of those folks in the future as well. I saw Cory Doctorow, I saw Tara Wheeler, I saw General Nakasone, who is the ex-head of the NSA. and a lot of other talks from people that you would not have any idea who they were, but they were all very good, and it was really, really interesting. It's been a really long week, but I'm always glad that I come here. That I make a lot of great connections and get to see a lot of really cool stuff. So I got one more story about the EFF Tech Trivia Contest, but I will save that for after the news. So that's enough of me talking about Hacker Summer Camp. Let's get to this week's news. All right, first up, this is from 404 Media. Resorts World Las Vegas, a hotel that is hosting attendees of the Defcon hacking conference this week, will perform daily inspection of rooms, including those displaying a privacy sign, in light of recent ransomware attacks against Vegas casinos, according to a letter from the hotel given to guests and a statement from the hotel. Members of the cybersecurity community have reacted with a mix of anger and disappointment on social media. And this is a quote from somebody who posted a picture of the piece of paper that was given to the guests. Quote, "Welcome and thank you for choosing Resorts World Las Vegas. We are pleased that you have joined us as you have chosen to stay with us for relaxation, fun, and excitement. As you may or may not know, a well-known hacking convention will be held in Las Vegas during your stay." And then the article says DEFCON runs from August 8th to 11th, with many attendees already in the city for the separate Black Hat security conference and other events like BSides. And then more quoting from the letter, it says, quote, "We remain committed to our guests' safety and understand the utmost importance of cybersecurity as well. In an effort to increase the safety of our guests, we will be conducting scheduled, brief, visual, and non-intrusive room inspections daily beginning Monday, August 5th. Rooms with a privacy sign will be included as part of the inspection process," unquote. In a statement, Resorts World Las Vegas explicitly linked the room searches to ransomware attacks, and this is a quote from a statement. Quote, "Resorts World Las Vegas is dedicated at all times to ensuring a safe, secure, and comfortable environment for all of our valued guests. In light of recent events in Las Vegas and the increasing ransomware threats to casinos and hotels on the Strip, all guests staying at our property were notified that starting on Monday, August 5th, 2024, and continuing for the next week, which is the duration of these 3 cybersecurity conferences, we will conduct brief, scheduled, visual, and non-intrusive room inspections daily," unquote. Hotels have generally increased the frequency of room searches in Las Vegas over the last several years. In 2017, a man opened fire from a hotel window, killing dozens and injuring hundreds. In the wake of it, many hotels performed regular room searches, including during DEF CON the following year. That time, videos, which I don't know why that matters, because I don't think the shooting happened during DEF CON. Or if it did, it was not related. Anyway, that time, videos showed hotel security staff at Caesars Palace joking about posting photos of guests' belongings to social media. Last year, hackers targeted both Caesars and MGM resorts in massive ransomware attacks. Caesars subsequently paid $15 million to the hackers. MGM refused to pay, and the attack disrupted gambling inside MGM's facilities and cost the company $110 million. Earlier this month, UK police announced that they had arrested someone allegedly linked to the MGM hack. Okay, so first of all, I got to ask the obvious question. How exactly is a visual inspection of a room going to stop a ransomware attack? What would you see in somebody's room that would tell you that they are hacking your hotel system? First of all, it's probably nothing more than a laptop, which every business person is going to have. And if I was the hacker, I would be taking the laptop with me. And second, if you'll notice in this very article, it said that the person arrested for allegedly performing this hack was arrested in the UK. Someone doing a ransomware attack is probably not staying at the hotel. Now, they might be. Maybe they're trying to, get at the system through the local Wi-Fi or something like that. But they certainly don't have to be. But yeah, in Las Vegas in particular, this is something that I've heard a lot of people attending these conferences complain about, is that a lot of the hotels here have been doing inspections of rooms, and people have not liked that. And from this article, we could see that, people being people, when they are intruding on these people's rooms, they are taking pictures of what people brought with them on their trip, probably embarrassing things, and posting it on social media. So it's a real privacy violation. I understand what they're trying to do, but doing this during the hacker conferences in order to find hackers to find people doing ransomware against the hotel? Do they really think that the generally white hat hackers coming to these conferences who are cybersecurity experts are coming here during this week in particular to try to hack into the hotel and perform a ransomware attack? It just makes no sense. All right, moving on. All right, this next one is from Apple Insider, and it talks about Apple's Safari browser, but really it affects most browsers, it seems here. So let me just read this briefly, and then we'll talk about it. Apple is fixing a vulnerability in Safari for Mac OS, which is Apple's default browser, that seems to date back to the dawn of Intel Macs, which, if you're not familiar with that, this was several years ago. The DEF CON hacking conference is taking place from August 8th to August 11th in Las Vegas, another DEF CON story, which hosts talks about newly discovered security issues. One talk set to occur over the long weekend will discuss an issue with Safari that Apple has worked to fix. And by the way, as I'm recording this talk has not happened yet, but I'm hoping to attend it. The exploit, discovered by Oligo Security, is a zero-day vulnerability involving the IP address 0.0.0.0, dubbed 0.0.0.0 day, which is a takeoff on 0 day, obviously, by the researchers. That exposes a flaw in how browsers handle network requests, which can be abused to access sensitive local services. The researchers found public websites can communicate with services running on a local network. It's possible for the websites to execute code on a visitor's hardware simply by targeting 0.0.0.0 instead of localhost or 127.0.0.1, and I'll come back to what that means in a minute. This is a bug that has been around for many years. The researchers found a report of a security issue involving the IP address dating back to 2006. The issue affects all major browsers, the researchers found, and all related companies have been informed as part of a responsible disclosure. For Safari, Apple has made changes to WebKit to block access to 0.0.0.0. It also added a check to the destination host IP address, blocking the request if it's all zeros. This change is being implemented as part of Safari 18, which is included in the betas of macOS Sequoia. And that's the next big release of macOS that'll be coming out this fall. The same issue has been found in Mozilla Firefox and Google Chrome. In the case of Firefox, there's a fix in progress, and Mozilla has changed the fetch specification to block 0.0.0.0. Google is similarly rolling out updates to block access to the same IP address. I'm not going to say that again, affecting both Chrome and Chromium-based browser users, which, as we've said on the show many times, there are several browsers that are based on the Chromium engine, which is made by Google, which would include things like Microsoft Edge and Brave. So, okay, a couple things. So if you're not really into networking, you may not know this, but there is a shorthand in networking IP addresses, which are, the addresses that computers need to talk to each other. And the one that kind of means home or this computer, the shorthand for that is either localhost, that's the domain name sort of, or 127.0.0.1. In fact, you might see some geeky t-shirts that say, there's no place like 127.0.0.1. That's a very geeky way of saying there's no place like home. So I believe what's basically going on here is that when you go to websites, the website can include links and other JavaScript code in there that could reference this local home address. And what that may allow them to do is get access to other services, web services running at those addresses. Now, this is probably not terribly common for the average person, so it's not something that you probably have to worry about. But it is a really interesting hack that allows a remote website to potentially talk to and perhaps even compromise like a local web service. Like, let's say you're running a Plex media server on your home computer so that you can, from your various devices, watch movies or TV shows that you've previously recorded or videos that you've ripped and put on your home media server so you can watch movies around the house. If you're running something like that on your home computer and then you're browsing to some website that is trying this hack, that website potentially could use this trick to try to talk to that server. And if that server has a vulnerability, it may be able to exploit that vulnerability remotely, which is something normally you couldn't do that because your firewall would block that. But it's kind of found a way around that with this hack. So it's pretty clever, actually. So anyway, I'm hoping to be able to see the talk. All these browser makers have been told about this. That's the responsible disclosure part of what this article is talking about, so that they can get their fixes out as soon as possible. And yet, this person is going to be talking about this vulnerability shortly. All right, next up, this is from The Record. I've actually got two from The Record, which is an organization I don't often quote, but these were interesting articles. The first one here is about facial recognition. The National Football League, or the NFL, is the latest organization to turn to facial authentication to bolster event security, according to an announcement this week. All 32 NFL stadiums will start using the technology this season after the league signed a contract with a company that uses facial scans to verify the identity of people entering events, venues, and other secure spaces. The facial authentication platform, which counts the Cleveland Browns owners as investors, will be used to streamline and secure entry for thousands of credentialed media, officials, staff, and guests, so they can easily access restricted areas such as press boxes and locker rooms, Jeff Boehm, the chief operating officer of Wicket, said in a LinkedIn post on Monday. And this is another quote from Boehm, quote, "Credential holders simply take a selfie before they come in, and then Wicket verifies their identity and checks their credentials with Accredit, a credentialing platform, as they walk through security checkpoints," unquote. Wicket technology was deployed in a handful of NFL stadiums last year as part of a pilot program. Other stadiums will start rolling it out beginning on August 8th when the preseason kicks off. Some teams also have extended their use of this technology to scan the faces of ticket holders. The Cleveland Browns, Atlanta Falcons, and New York Mets have all used the company's facial authentication software to authenticate fans with tickets, according to Stadium Tech Report. And this is a quote from Brandon Covert, what a name, the vice president of information technology for the Cleveland Browns, in a testimonial on Wicket's website. It says, quote, "Fans come look at the tablet and instantly the tablet recognizes the fan. It's almost a half-second stop. It's not even a stop, more of a pause. It has greatly reduced the amount of time and friction that comes with entering the stadium. It's so much faster," unquote. The Cleveland Browns also use Wicket to verify the ages of fans purchasing alcohol at concession stands, according to Wicket's LinkedIn page. The use of facial recognition or authentication technology, particularly when applied to thousands of people who are scanned in the course of doing their job or entering a sports stadium, has long concerned privacy advocates. In addition to concerns about the technology being used to track people's locations, privacy advocates and academics say that facial recognition technology intensifies racial and gender discrimination because it is more frequently inaccurate when identifying people of color, women, and non-binary individuals. The NFL is not the only sports league deploying facial recognition technology. Soccer stadiums worldwide are rapidly adopting and deploying facial recognition technology to surveil fans, according to a Privacy International report published in May. 25 of the top 100 soccer stadiums in the world use the technology to bolster video surveillance, according to the report. So yeah, this is a thing. This is something that is starting to happen, and it's kind of like using your facial recognition, like the clear thing at the airport. I mean, yes, it probably is faster, even if the technology were perfect, and it's not. There are still a lot of privacy problems with this. Again, what we got to realize is that behind the scenes, this is probably being done by a third party, in this case, a company called Wicket. Who knows how they're treating that data? Somehow they must have a database of you with your name and your face so that when you walk up to this thing, it can recognize you. Oh, that's Kerry Parker. And yes, I know Kerry Parker just bought a ticket because of some other information that they've got access to. And they say, yeah, come on in. Welcome to the game. But then it could also be used to track you everywhere you go, watch what you purchase, watch where you sit, watch who you sit with, who you entered with. And facial recognition technology is starting to do other things too for marketing purposes. It might try to find out what excites you, what you look at, what catches your eye. Let's say it was looking at you while you were standing in line at the concession stand. It's not a stretch, and this is something that these things can be programmed to do. I'm not saying these are doing it, but marketing people would love this. They could keep an eye on what you're looking at, right? You're waiting in line, you're looking at the menus, you're looking at what's behind the counter. You know, maybe your eyes linger one place longer than another. Maybe your facial expression changes. Maybe they could even get to the point where they can read your lips. It just gets creepier and creepier, I guess is what I'm saying. I understand that in some cases they're doing this, like in this article, they're talking about the people that need to be restricted in access. They're using it as a security measure. But they're also using it, again, in some of these places, they're starting to use it just to let people in. And yeah, it might be faster, though I can't imagine it's actually faster than scanning a barcode. And it's absolutely less accurate to scan a face than to scan a barcode. So we got to be careful when they trot out these convenience and even security arguments for technology like this, because the data that they're collecting and the data that they had to collect to make it work is scary personal data that if it got loose could be really bad. So honestly, we need to push back on this. When I was coming out to Vegas actually for this, when I was going through, I have TSA PreCheck, which by the way, involved me giving over a lot of personal information because I've actually got global entry. But anyway, when I walk up to the security booth or whatever, the security people to get my ID checked, I had two options. And thankfully, I did have two options. One of them was look into this camera and we will identify you. And the other one was just, hand him my ID and have him check it and give it back to me and I walk through. Which actually, in this case, by the way, it wasn't a human looking at it. He put the ID into a scanner so he could probably read the barcode on the back and maybe even take a picture of my ID and save it into a database. But as I walked up, the next one in line for me would have been the one that would take my picture. And I said to the woman behind the security thing, I said, can I not do this? Can I not have my face scanned? And she said, yeah, you just have to go to that guy. And so I waited until he was free and I went through the other side, just kind of prove a concept to see if I could kind of assert some rights and say that I don't want my face scanned. But, who knows how much longer that's going to be an option. All right, next up, another one from the record, and this is even creepier somehow than the previous one, though it's mostly theoretical at this point. Okay. Ford Motor Company is seeking a patent for technology that would allow vehicles to track the speed of surrounding cars, photograph them, and relay detailed information to police, making it easier for law enforcement to surveil action on the road. The patent application filed with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office on July 18th is titled Systems and Methods for Detecting Speeding Violations, and describes how photographs of speeding cars could be packaged in a report that includes the time, location, and speed of the offending vehicle. That report would be sent via the internet to automated trackers placed along the road, Ford's patent application says, allowing the digest to be easily shared between police officers. Ford is one of the largest worldwide auto brands and ranked third in the American market in 2023 by netting 12% of new vehicle registrations, according to Experian. Privacy advocates criticized Ford's plan, and this is a quote from data broker expert Jeff Jockish, who's also co-founder of the data privacy and research firm Obscure IQ, and by the way, somebody who I've been talking with on perhaps getting on each other's podcast. And Jeff says, quote, giving consumers the ability to report each other to law enforcement for speeding is pretty dystopian, and it's a slippery slope with technology. It's a terrible idea, unquote. A Ford spokesperson said the technology is only intended for law enforcement vehicles that the automaker sells to police. And this is a quote from that spokesperson, quote, the patent explicitly states this idea for a system is specific for application in law enforcement vehicles, such as the Ford Police Interceptor, as it would automate a capability that law enforcement already have in use today, except this could utilize the built-in systems and sensors in law enforcement vehicles in the future, unquote. However, while the patent application does not state whether the technology could be used in cars sold to average consumers, it also does not explicitly state that the technology would exclusively apply only to vehicles Ford sells to police. Late last year, Ford ditched a patent application for a system that would take control of cars whose owners were behind on payments. And I think we talked about this when this came out, but this is still crazy. That technology would have directed self-driving cars to automatically head to repo lots, as in repossession. That patent application said the technology also would let lenders remotely and permanently lock cars, disable steering wheels, brakes, and air conditioning, and play loud sounds inside of vehicles for drivers behind on payments. Can you imagine? You're late on your car payment and all of a sudden your air conditioning doesn't work. And it says, and your car tells you, like through your car speakers, it says, hey, deadbeat, you need to pay your bill. And until you do, your air conditioning's not going to work. And then eventually it turns off your steering wheel and your brakes. So your car is basically undrivable until you pay them. So yeah, automotive dystopia is here, folks, and it is just getting worse. All right, next up, this is from the New York Times, and it's a Kashmir Hill article again, following up on some of her great reporting and exposés around car privacy. And it's a little bit of an update that is really just makes you want to shake your head. If you drive a car made by General Motors and it has an internet connection, your car's movements and exact location are being collected and shared anonymously with a data broker. This practice, disclosed in a letter sent by Senators Ron Wyden of Oregon and Edward J. Markey of Massachusetts to the Federal Trade Commission on Friday, is yet another way in which automakers are tracking drivers, often without their knowledge. Previous reporting in the New York Times, and this is articles that I've covered here before, which the letter cited, reveal how automakers including GM, Honda, and Hyundai collected information about drivers' behavior, such as how often they slammed on the brakes, accelerated rapidly, and exceeded the speed limit. It was then sold to the insurance industry, which used it to help gauge individual drivers' riskiness. The two Democratic senators, both known for privacy advocacy, zeroed in on GM, Honda, and Hyundai because all three had made deals, the Times reported, with Verisk, an analytics company that sold the data to insurers. In the letter, the senators urged the FTC's chairwoman, Lina Khan, to investigate how the auto industry collects and shares customers' data. One of the surprising findings of an investigation by Mr. Wyden's office was just how little the automakers made from selling driving data. According to the letter, Verisk paid Honda $25,920 over 4 years for information about 97,000 cars, or just 26 cents per car. Hyundai was paid just over $1 million, or 61 cents per car over 6 years. GM would not reveal how much it had paid, Mr. Wyden's office said. People familiar with GM's program previously told the Times that driving behavior data had been shared for more than 8 million cars, with the company making an amount in the low millions of dollars from the sale. So basically, again, for cents per car. GM previously also shared data with LexisNexis Risk Solutions. And here's a quote from that letter from the senators. It says, quote, "Companies should not be selling Americans data without their consent, period. But it is particularly insulting for automakers that are selling cars for tens of thousands of dollars to then squeeze out a few additional pennies of profit with consumers' private data," unquote. Hyundai enrolled any car with an internet connection in data sharing, the letter said. GM and Honda customers had to opt in to be included, but Mr. Wyden called the enrollment process, quote-unquote, deceptive. The sharing of driver behavior data stopped after the Times reported on it in March. Verisk shut down its data exchange for driving behavior in April. So, there's not a whole lot to say there. The key thing is, oh my God, these companies undermined your privacy and sold all this really detailed location data to these data brokers who then used it to sell to insurance companies and who knows who else for less than $1 per vehicle. That just makes me sick to my stomach. All right, we do have a couple good stories here too. First, this one's from 9to5Mac, and it's about a very welcome ruling in at least one federal court here in the United States. A federal court has ruled that U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents cannot search smartphones without a warrant. The ruling didn't actually help the defendant who brought the case and only applies to the Eastern District of New York where the case was brought, but may help set a privacy precedent. Now, I'm going to get this guy's name totally wrong, but let me give this a shot. Kurbanali Sultanov returned to the U.S. at JFK, which is an airport in New York, where border agents told him he needed to hand over his smartphone and the passcode needed to access it. Child sexual abuse material was found on the device, and he was indicted. According to the court ruling, Sultanov sought to suppress the evidence on the grounds that it was obtained illegally. And this is a quote, I think, from their ruling. In support of his motion to suppress the physical evidence, Sultanov argues that the Fourth Amendment requires the search of a cellular device at the border to be supported by a warrant and probable cause, neither of which was present here. Back to the article, the government did subsequently obtain a search warrant for a more detailed examination of 2 phones owned by the defendant, but he sought to have this thrown out as it stemmed from an unconstitutional search. The court refused this request, finding that the law enforcement agent acted in good faith and that the material found during the initial search was not the only grounds for the search warrant being issued. However, it did rule that a warrant is required for any search of a phone. That decision was welcomed by civil rights groups. While this ruling applies to U.S. citizens and foreign nationals alike, but the latter is a rather academic matter, since CBP can deny admission to a foreign visitor even if they are in possession of a visa or a visa waiver. Anyone refusing a search would likely have their admission to the country denied. So this is something we've talked about on the show before, but it's been a while. And this is something that I have harped on for a long time, and that is that the CBP, or the Customs and Border Protection Agency here in the United States, has some really broad powers to what they can search for people coming into the country, even if you're a U.S. citizen. And their mandate, their ruling, has often been interpreted to mean that they have kind of extra constitutional access if you're close, quote unquote, close to the border. Now, it turns out that close to the border means, I think, if I remember the ruling, it's within 100 miles of the U.S. border, which is pretty wide. And I'm just pulling this from memory. There's something like 33% of all U.S. residents live in that space. And you might think, that's crazy. How could that be? Well, there's a lot of really big U.S. cities that are near the border. So it just turns out there's a lot of population there. But yeah, this is a welcome ruling, and because this has not gone up to the Supreme Court yet, and this article doesn't say, but it may be headed that way. At least for the area of the border that is affected by the Eastern District of New York, which I'm not sure how far that stretches. The current law around this now says that you need a warrant to get into somebody's phone. Before then, they could basically just say, "Look, I need to get into your phone." Now, if you're a U.S. citizen, they couldn't keep you from coming into the country, but they could confiscate your devices if you didn't, let them search them. But as this thing says, if you're not a U.S. citizen, they could just say, well, sorry, you either let us get into your device right now or you're not coming into the country. And if you flew in, if you're going through customs at an airport, which, a lot of people would be doing, what are you going to do at that point? You're really over a barrel. So anyway, this is interesting. I'll be very interested to see how this plays out, but it's a very welcome ruling, and it's something I think that hopefully will eventually become the way things work throughout the United States. Okay, this next one is from Apple Insider, and it got a lot of press. You may have even heard of this one because I think even the mainstream news picked up on this, and that is that Google was found to be a monopoly. But there's some subtleness to this that we need to talk about. Okay. So first, let's read the article. Google violated antitrust law in the United States. A federal judge has ruled, with Google ruled by the court to have monopolized advertising and search. The U.S. Department of Justice antitrust lawsuit against Alphabet, the parent company of Google, has hit an important development. According to Judge Amit Mehta, and after a 10-week trial, Google has been ruled to be in breach of Section 2 of the Sherman Act, often called the Sherman Antitrust Act. And this is a quote from the ruling. It just says, quote, Google is a monopolist, and it has acted as one to maintain its monopoly, unquote. The ruling means the court agrees with the DOJ's accusation of Google acting as an illegal monopoly in the search market, as well as in online advertising. However, the ruling only determines Google's liability and not any fines or other restitution. This is not the only DOJ lawsuit Google faces in 2024. Starting September 9th, it will be facing another trial covering the advertising technology side of its empire. The lawsuit from the DOJ argued that Google maintained a monopoly by paying billions of dollars to firms so that it was the most prominent or first choice for consumers. Apple was the recipient of some of the payments, with the iPhone maker handed $20 billion from Google in 2022. The payment was to maintain its default search engine status. The $20 million figure, this says million, this must be a typo because it just said billion. I'm pretty sure it was billion. The $20 billion figure was accidentally disclosed by Eddie Q, who is a senior vice president at Apple, during the trial, and it came to light during an unsealing of testimonies. During the trial, it was also revealed that Microsoft tried to make Bing the default search engine for Safari by offering Apple 90% of its advertising revenue. Microsoft also offered to sell Bing to Apple in 2020. The regular billion-dollar payments from Google to Apple may be lucrative for the latter, but may not necessarily continue. In July, Google was reportedly keen to lessen its dependence on Apple for search traffic and revenue. Apple's payment from Google represented a 36% cut of Google's ad revenue from searches performed through Safari on iPhone. Following the DOJ's win in the lawsuit, this now means the annual payment itself could be at risk. With the potential for Judge Mehta to order for Google to be broken up, it's even more probable that the gravy train will come to an abrupt stop. Okay, so, that sounds like a really big deal, and I guess at face value it kind of is, but And because I'm here in Las Vegas at DEF CON, Cory Doctorow is also here from the EFF, and I bumped into him a couple times just in these first couple of days. And I actually asked him about this, and I made the point, like, this is really just the first step, right? I mean, this is going to be tied up in courts for years. And he said, yeah, it's going to be at least 5 years. This is going to be tied up in court because Google's going to appeal, and they're going to go through a lot of rigmarole to figure out what this thing is. Then even if they kind of say, yes, this is a monopoly, then they still got to figure out, well, okay, what are we going to do about that? So this could have really, really big impacts, but it's not going to be anything that happens right away. In the meantime, what it's going to do is it's going to make Google be very, very careful about what it does. And it might actually cause Google to start making some changes to how it does business, including like this thing we talked about here, this deal with Apple to make Google the default search engine on Safari. You know, they may start changing that, or they may start reworking that deal in light of this. So this could have some pretty major impacts even before all these details and litigation or whatever sorts itself out and it gets finalized. So we'll have to keep an eye on this. It was very, very interesting, but it's not really a done deal yet. We don't know what the real outcome of this is going to be yet. All right, now let's get to my tip of the week. Now, last time we did our OSINT, or open source intelligence reconnaissance, our research. We went and tried to find, at least from the top 2 data brokers and the top 8 people search sites, find what information we could about ourselves. So if you missed that one, you're going to want to go back and check that out for sure, or you could just go back and read the blog article about it on my website, firewallsdon'tstopdragons.com. So we're going to pick up today with basically part 2 of that, which is, okay, now that you've been shocked at all the information you found about yourself, what do we do about that? So before I get into this, I think it's important to understand why I think you should do this for yourself. So some of you are already wondering, like, hey, haven't I heard of services that will do this for you if I just pay them money? Yes, you have. You've potentially heard of multiple services, because there are multiple services that do this. And they claim, some of them are reputation sites. They claim to help clean up your reputation by deleting data. Others are just there to help get your public data pulled down from these people search sites and data brokers and things like that. And they do exist. You can pay them money to do this. But here's why I think you should do it yourself. And I believe Jason Edison, when we interviewed him a couple months ago, said pretty much the same thing. First of all, and this is one of the main points that Jason made, was that in order to do this, in order to have somebody else do this for you, to deputize someone else on your behalf to go out there and pretend to be you or act as your agent to try to remove this data from these sites, is you're going to have to give them a whole bunch of your personal information to do it. So now you've just ironically increased the number of places that your personal data exists out there where it could be abused or stolen or hacked or whatever. Second, these companies are going to do basically exactly what I'm going to tell you to do and what the folks at Intel Techniques are telling you to do. But they're not going to put as much effort into it as you would, because they're probably just going to automate it. They probably have some scripts. They're probably just going to take all this information you give them, enter it into a little program they've written, and they're going to just automate this process. And if anything fails, oh, well, it fails. I doubt you're going to get the white glove treatment of some human being following up multiple times with each of these things, if necessary, to try to get the stuff cleaned up when that first easy attempt fails. And then finally, this is not going to be a one-time exercise. I hate to tell you, but this is something you're going to have to unfortunately keep an eye on, which means that if you pay someone else to do it, it's not a one-time thing. It's going to be a subscription. And a lot of them do sell it as a subscription. So it's going to get pricey. So honestly, it's kind of better if you just know how to do it yourself. Then you can monitor it yourself and take care of it if it comes back up again or if there's any kind of hiccups. So another caveat before we get started is that deleting your data is not nearly as easy as it should be, or as it could be, to be honest. These companies don't want it to be easy. They are making money, good money, off of your data. And even though a lot of this data is public data, technically, they've collected it from public sources. They have gone to the effort, or they've written computer programs to go to the effort of scraping all of this data from these public sites, putting together these dossiers into very tantalizing profiles on you. And I'll come back to what I mean by tantalizing as we go through this, and get other people to pay for that. So it is not in their best interest to have any of this data taken down. So let me give you a little idea what you should expect. Because they don't want you to do this. A lot of these data brokers have these, what we call dark patterns. They will try to distract you or dissuade you or discourage you from removing your data. Some of the things that they will tell you is that, hey, you know what? This is all public data. You can tell us to remove it, but it's all still out there anyway. So, why bother? They will give you this impression that trying to do this is futile, that it is a Sisyphean task. When I tried to delete my data from LexisNexis, they even said this. They said, quote, "Please understand that by opting out, you may experience future difficulty using online systems for such things as instant identity and insurance verification," unquote. That, I'm fine with that. Basically, they're just trying to sow fear, uncertainty, and doubt, what we call FUD. So be ready for that. And honestly, me personally, as I was doing that, the more they tried to do that, the more it made me want to get this done. The other thing to remember is that privacy laws, especially in the United States, are just a complete and utter mess. There is no federal privacy law. There's a few states that have privacy laws, but they're all different. So you may find that what is possible will be different depending not only on what country you're in, but even what state or region you're in. So these are all things to be prepared for. Do not let it discourage you. Know that those things are coming. So just to give you an idea, if you have not done this already, when I requested my information from Axiom, that's ACXIOM, one of the big data brokers, I did get an email from about 2 weeks later and was able to download my report, which was 102 pages long. And it contained, many variations of my name, including common misspellings of my name, a lot of past addresses, phone numbers old and current, even one that I thought was private, a bunch of weird advertising identifiers, IP addresses that were associated with me, multiple ages, like multiple ones because many of them were close, but they weren't all the correct, my ethnicity and my religion, including something that they called my assimilation level, an estimated number of kids, an estimated salary, detailed info on my buying activity and interests, cars that I own, loans that I've had, estimated alcohol usage, likelihood of having a healthy diet, including an estimate of my body mass index, estimate of my interest in health and drug products, and much, much more. It was just absolutely mind-blowing. One of the really odd parts about the report is there was a whole ton of information on estimating my interest in specific car models. Like 75% of that 102 pages were specific categories about specific makes and models of vehicles and how likely I would be to buy one or lease one. It was very odd how much information was in there about cars. And one key note at the very end of my report said, Axiom does not process sensitive personal information on residents of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Colorado, Connecticut, Texas, Oregon, or Montana. So, if you live there, lucky you. So let's start with deleting your data from the two data brokers that we talked about, Axiom and LexisNexis. Axiom's opt-out page was deceptively simple. It's this weird little form where you can fill in multiple things. You can fill in mailing addresses, email addresses, and phone numbers. And this is one important reason why you want to request your profile before you do this, because you should ask them to look you up based on all of that information for the ones that they already know about. But I wouldn't volunteer to them any other information which they don't already have. So, I gave them the email addresses, the mailing addresses, and the phone numbers that they knew about for me. And I didn't give them any that they didn't already have. So you kind of go through this form and you keep adding phone numbers and stuff. You hit the little plus sign and you add addresses, email addresses, phone numbers until you're done. And then you say, okay, those are all the things I want you to look for. Go find those and delete them. And again, they wanted also an address to contact you with. And I gave them an email alias for me, which I gave to all of them so that I could have my mail program put all of those in a single folder so I could keep them all organized. Now, LexisNexis was actually a little simpler, but they do ask for your name and your social security number. Now, they probably already have that, but I can't recall if I tried to first submit without that. It wasn't labeled as mandatory. I think I did, and I think they said I had to. But again, I'm pretty sure they probably already have that information anyway. Now, LexisNexis also has this thing called a security freeze, which sounds like it's very similar to a credit freeze, except for personal information. You could look into that if you want, but they actually wanted you to upload a copy of a government ID, like a driver's license or a passport, in order to do this. And they had some secondary things that you could upload, but there was none of them that were not terribly personal. But if you really want to pursue that, there's a link in the article that you could check out for that. Now, for the people search sites, they were all different. And again, you might want to check out my first article on this. I've got a downloadable template you can use for this to kind of keep track of what you did and keep some to-do list items for yourself, because you're going to have to follow up with these people at some point. But let me give you some key things to keep in mind as you're doing these. Again, they're all a little bit different, and some of them are honestly just very strange. The hoops they make you jump through, again, the dark patterns they throw at you. Like at one point I was going through one of these things and they kept giving me all these warnings like, warning, you must accept this next thing because some of the things we're about to show you could be shocking or could be, things that only an adult should see, or, what, I don't know. I have no criminal record. I have no idea what they were talking about, but they make it sound like this is a super, super big deal. It's very strange. You'll find out when you do it yourself, but it's very odd. So again, it's important that you know what they already have on you, because in a lot of cases, they're going to ask you for more information. In some cases, they're going to say, hey, we'd just like to confirm or help firm up the results or filter down the results. Can you give me a middle name, or can you give me maybe another address or another phone number? Don't give them any of that. You can just give them your first and last name and maybe the state you live in or the region you're in, and do a search. And as long as your name is unique enough, now if you've got a very, very common name, then maybe give them a middle initial or something like that. But they'll give you a list of everything that matches, and you just might have more matches than most, and you'll have to sort through them. And they usually give you first, last name, middle initial, and what they believe is your age, and then what city you live in. So that's usually enough for you to find one. Oh yeah, that one's me, and this one is not me. But once you know what they have on you, which is the exercise we did last time, try not to give them any more information about yourself while you're doing this deletion process than necessary. Some of them have these really stupid progress bars that flash up, like, we're searching, analyzing, looking for all this information, gathering your report. That's all BS. They're not doing anything. It doesn't take time to do this. They have the information. They're just delaying you, and oftentimes showing you pop-up messages and warnings to try to distract you, dissuade you, and discourage you. Don't let any of that stuff fool you. So as you're doing this process, take really good notes on this, everything you had to go through, everything that you signed, all the information you filled out. Again, I prefer to do this digitally. I took screenshots, like when the form fill out, like here's the information to tell us about yourself that you want us to delete. Once I filled all that in, I took screenshots of that so I know what I told them. And if there's any warnings or any, information that they give me, like a request ID or a submission ID, I made sure I copied all that down. Take really good notes about what happens as you go through this process so you can refer to it later, especially since you're going through so many of these and they're all different. It's a really good way to jog your memory. And then when it's all said and done, create a to-do list for things you need to follow up on. They will usually give you some indication of how long it might take for your information to be processed. So make sure you check back, after that time, or give us with a little bit of a buffer to see if those profiles are gone. Remember to, if they do have different profiles, when you click on those links, save the links so you can immediately go back to them and see if they're gone. But you're also going to want to do the searches again just to make sure they didn't pop up again under some different ID. And then once you've gone through all that, and I know it sounds like a lot, set reminders for yourself. I would check back if they did have information about you. I would check back again in 3 to 6 months to see if it's popped back up somehow, because these guys just keep scraping data and they're probably going to repopulate it. They should, given the information you've given them, if that happens again, they should just throw it on the floor and not create a new profile for you. But some of them are going to do it anyway. Some of these are in foreign countries like Russia that really don't care. So you're going to find that some of these things are going to creep back up, and you may have to go through this process again. If they had nothing on you, then maybe check back in another 12 months to see if something has popped up. Now, again, don't do all of this at once. Pace yourself. Do a couple of these at a time. Wait a little while and do a couple more. It could be frustrating. It could be tiring. I would not do all of this at once. I did it all at once because I wanted to gather all this information for you, but pace yourself. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And when this is done, after you've seen what information you found about yourself, some of the things you might notice as you're going through this is they will list who they believe your family members are. You might take special note of that. And then honestly, if you can muster the energy and the willpower and the kindness, you should help your friends and family with this too. Certainly your immediate family, siblings, parents, kids, and maybe a close friend too. You should kind of walk them through this process and help them do this too, because this is something we should all be doing. And the more people that do this, I think, maybe they'll finally get the message that that they need to be listening to us more and collecting less data. So there you have it. There is the news and your tip of the week. All right, so one more story here before we go. And if you're not interested, of course, you can skip this. But there's a couple fun things that happen at every DEF CON that I try to make every year. And one of them is the EFF has a tech trivia contest run by Cooper Quinton in his Cyber Tiger striped suit outfit, which is usually a lot of fun. This year, for some reason, it was really not in a very good location. The microphone he was using was horrible. They had a really tiny screen. The logistics this year were really bad. But mostly this was about socialization. So we actually put together our winning team. A couple years ago, our team won EFF Tech Trivia. So we got the band back together for the most part. We had a couple replacements. Death Veggie from Cult of the Dead Cow was actually in our group this year. And we named our group Smarty Weirdos, which is, you'd have to hear the story from Luke himself. But basically that's what his grandmother kind of referred to he and his friends. You know, how did he put it? Neurodivergent was not a word that was used back then. So she just called Luke and all his friends Smarty Weirdos. So that was the name of our group. Well, many of the people in the group were either from Cult of the Dead Cow or CDC adjacent. And turns out the Cult of the Dead Cow actually had their own group there. And Medusa, a.k.a. Menace 4, it's a long story, and Dildog and some of the other folks created their own team participating in this. And there were probably 15 total teams in this room competing for this. And she got the idea that they were going to name their team Death Veggie, just to tweak Luke. And then they convinced some other teams around them to also include Death Veggie in their names. There was Death Veggie, Not Death Veggie, Son of Death Veggie. There was a lot of teams with Death Veggie in the name, none of which actually contained Death Vegetable, because he was on my team. So anyway, there's like 6 rounds of questions, a lot of pop culture stuff. You know, in the past, that used to be more technical, like, you know, what port certain protocols and things run on. You submit your answers, you bribe the EFF with donations to get some extra points in some cases. It's all for fun, and it's all for awareness and supporting the EFF. I think they raised well over $2,000 just in that night. But we didn't quite win this year. We came in very, very close second. I think we were only off by 1 point from the winning team. But the really important thing is our team beat out every other team that had Death Veggie in their name. So we avenged Luke. So anyway, that's my story here from Hacker Summer Camp. There were many, many other stories I didn't get a chance to talk about. It would have taken too much time. If you go to defcon.org, eventually a lot of these talks will be posted there. You can see who spoke and what their topics were. It's a little bit hard to navigate, but you can find your way around there. Note that not everything is listed there. DEF CON has a lot of what they call villages, which are kind of like conferences within conferences. And a lot of those villages, like Crypto and Privacy Village, Voting Village, Car Hacking Village, there's all sorts of these villages now, maybe a couple dozen of them. A lot of them maintain their own separate websites where they post recorded videos of these talks. There's a lot of them, and DEF CON's really big about sharing. So keep an eye on it. It may take them a few weeks. I think I've even seen it take a couple months. But eventually they will try to post all these videos out there, and you can see what some of these things are like, and some of these things that I referred to, you can go back and actually watch them for yourself. Like check out that hacker panel, or check out Cory Doctorow's speech, or check out Joseph Cox's talk about Darkwire. All that stuff should eventually be available on the DEF CON website. I will put links to the DEF CON 32 website in the show notes. All right, that will do it for this week, everybody. We got some great interviews coming up. I'm going to be talking to Andy Yen later this week. I'll be recording it this week, and that will air for you guys sometime the next month or so, probably. I've got an interview coming up with Zoe McDonald from Mozilla about dating app privacy. I should be interviewing the folks behind the Tunnel Vision research project we'll be talking about VPNs. I've got several promises from people that I met here this week that want to do interviews coming up that should be very interesting. And of course, episode 400 is not too far away, and we'll be talking with Bruce Schneier for that one. That'll be a lot of fun. So subscribe if you haven't. That way you won't miss any of that stuff. If you're new to the podcast, go back and check out some of the old episodes. There's some really great, I've had some really great interviews that you might want to go back and check out. And help me spread the word. I'm going to be talking to you soon about a new campaign to raise awareness for the podcast, and probably for the blog and the newsletter too. I'll be crowdsourcing some of that out to you guys, so stay tuned, and I'll let you know how you can help me spread the word. All right, take care, everybody. Stay safe out there, and until next week, as always, don't get caught with your drawbridge down.